Now we come to the Legion organization. First, the hierarchy and structure. The organization and structure of the Dark Angels Legion predated the standard patterns of military organization laid out by the Principia Bellicosa. Indeed, many of the doctrines and formations in common use throughout the Legiones Astartes found their origins in the early practices of the First Legion. In fact, this would seem to have been one of the prime missions gifted to the Legion by the Emperor to discover, refine, and perfect those strategies and patterns that would allow his new gene-crafted transhuman warriors to perform at peak efficiency. When Imperial scholars speak of the standard form of a Space Marine Legion, they speak of the Dark Angels, for it was in the sacrifice of the First Legion that these structures were first born. While Robert Guilliman would later add to and adapt this structure, even that superlative general built upon the foundations that had been defined by the wars of the First Legion before the return of Lionel Johnson. Even the Lion, upon resuming command of his legion, would bow before the wisdom of these founders, content to bind this original structure to a single vision and authority, and it remained largely unchanged in form until the second founding. In the earliest years of its existence, the First Legion would experiment with every form of war, every style of organization and formation, with a host of warriors dedicated to almost any tactical or strategic ploy. This meant that the Legion contained specialists suited to every opponent and battlefield, but it lacked a cohesive structure to organize those warriors. It was by its very nature chaotic and fluid, ever-changing, as certain tactics fell out of favor and new ones rose to prominence, and as such, it lacked an easily defined sense of organization. This chaos was a necessary tool for its purpose, and in time, it would resolve into order, into a system of supporting and overlapping formations that existed in parallel and allowed the Dark Angels to confront any foe on any battlefield and overcome them. This system of specialized formations stood at the very heart of the First Legion and was the core around which it was built. Of hosts and orders. The First Legion's hierarchical unit structure was composed of a descending hierarchy of chapters, companies, and squads, as was any other, according to the dictates of the Principia Bellicosa. This was the shape of its overt hierarchy, the uncloaked face it showed to its brother Space Marine legions and the Imperium at large. Yet each of the warriors of the Legion also held a concurrent position in a second, covert layer of organization, one they kept hidden from those not of the Legion. This secret strata of organization was composed primarily of two distinct bodies, the Great Hosts and the Orders of Battle of Hecatonistica. Both of these bodies served to allow the collection and codification of martial knowledge by the warriors of the Legion, and to see that this knowledge was available on the battlefield when it was needed most by the generals of the Great Crusade. The Great Hosts were the larger of the two covert organizations, numbering at first in the dozens, with each individual force claiming the loyalty of hundreds of individual warriors. The hosts were each dedicated to the perfection of one art of war, as some specialized in siege warfare, others in the art of skirmish, and yet more in the brutal discipline of shock assault and many other tactics besides. The hosts did not fight as cohesive formations in most situations, being spread across the various chapters and companies of the Legion. Any given unit might comprise members of a variety of different hosts, all working together, lending their experience and skills to their battle brothers, so that the whole had a value far greater than any individual piece. No matter the challenge faced by even the least unit of the First Legion, it would find at least one expert in its ranks, a distinct advantage when compared to many of the younger legions, each of which was dedicated to a single brand of conquest and ill-equipped to fight outside its preferred sphere. Only in the most dire of situations did a host assemble en masse, its acolytes called out from the ranks to form a single body of those most skilled in their chosen art, be it the siege rites of the host of stone or the breaching clades of the host of the void. Such a body could be a potent force in its chosen element, more than capable of turning the tide of even the direst battle. Each host followed the same organizational structure, each with its own master, marshals, and initiates organized into cells scattered across the chapters of the Legion. These cells were embedded at the very heart of the Legion's core, operating alongside the companies and squads of its open and public hierarchy. Any given squad might very well include members from several cells, each bound in service to different hosts. They were at once brothers, sealed by the oaths made to Legion and Sergeant, and made strangers by the secret ties and mysteries of their host. A warrior owed his obedience to both his commander in the ranks of the Legion's public hierarchy and his superior in the hidden society of his host, with only the subtle context of tradition to tell when one held authority over the other. It is a testament to the fortitude of the minds and the enduring loyalty of these warriors that such a complex system not only functioned on the field of battle, but excelled in bringing triumph to the First Legion. The great hosts of the First Legion recruited openly and wildly among the uninitiated warriors of the Legion. When new intakes of recruits reached front-line companies, they would find themselves under constant scrutiny from the appointed procurators of the hosts, each seeking signs of the aspirant's worthiness to join their hosts in their conduct on the field of battle. Those selected by the procurators, having already faced their trials upon the battlefield and in the subtle tests conducted by their battle brothers and commanders, would be swiftly inducted into the most basic tenets of the host and granted the right to bear its mark upon their power armor. Those warriors initiated into a host met freely within the precincts of the Legion's holdings and encampments to debate strategy and the proper use of arms, with those of the higher ranks responsible for the training of those below them. These gatherings, though not secret, were considered a private matter of the host, a forum where a warrior's standing within his host stood greater than that of his formal rank within the Legion. Members could speak on its business, the practice and protection of their unique rites of battle and tradition, without fear of censure, for it was considered the duty of the hosts to preserve the Legion through their unstinting pursuit of excellence. The Orders of Battle, also known as the Hecatonistica, though more numerous, boasted far fewer adherents than the hosts. Of the hundreds of individual orders, most could count no more than a few dozen initiates, a mere handful of warriors by comparison to the vast hosts and chapters of the Greater Legion. Such warrior fraternities could not disseminate their knowledge across an entire legion in the same manner as the hosts, and harbored a skill set ill-disposed towards such a use. The orders of battle were experts in a single bloody aspect of war, the destruction of a singular foe or the mastery of some aberrant field of conflict. When a battle group of the First Legion encountered a foe worthy of their hatred, or a field of battle whose nature defied their contempt, it was to the orders of battle that they turned, forming a cenobium, a cadre of the warriors from an order trained to negate the foe, to lead the assault and to turn all their secret knowledge into a weapon to smite the enemies of mankind. Each order of battle maintained a strict hierarchy, though no two were exactly the same, with each organized to best serve the aims and lore kept by that order. For, unlike the hosts, which openly recruited and shared much of their knowledge when called to battle, the orders were of a more secretive nature. The true position and nature of the ranks within a given order were only truly understood by their inducted initiates, with a system of ciphers and cryptic signs unique to each order used to mark them out to those who had been inducted into their ranks. Each tier of the order granted an initiate greater understanding of the mysteries it had been created to preserve, and placed upon them a greater burden of responsibility to keep that knowledge ever ready to be called upon at need. The order would meet to affirm their knowledge in the form of rituals and tradition, as well as to train in more practical ways, to keep ready blade and bolt for the day when their knowledge would be required in the name of the Legion and the Imperium. Most orders maintained a sanctum chamber aboard any void ship to which a cell of their members was posted, a private space into which entry was only granted to ordained members of the order and where ritual training and study could be pursued in seclusion. Some of the largest orders controlled space stations, most often based in and around war zones that supported or required their unique skills. The Order of Broken Spears operated an orbital stronghold capable of hosting all 138 known members, set in place above the broken messes and twisting canyons of Argyel 3, a death world whose rock was laced with traces of heavy metals that countered most active sensor systems. Given that the Broken Spears were masters in the art of ambush and the silent war of wits that prevailed in such dense and confusing terrain, this served as the perfect location for the training of its initiates and as a retreat for those veterans seeking to contemplate the teachings of the Order without distraction. These sanctums, whether grand strongholds or Spartan chambers aboard a ship of war, also served a crucial role in the recruitment of new members. Such prospective acolytes were identified by the senior members of a cell by the record of their achievements and skill, and were subject to much debate within the cell before any decision was made. Once summoned by the cell, a warrior could expect to face a series of grueling physical and mental trials, administered in the seclusion of the Order's domain, where these candidates were granted limited rights of entry, though often under binding oaths to hold secret all that was witnessed. Such trials varied wildly between orders, though often presented the very real possibility of serious injury or even death for those that accepted the challenge. The exact nature of these rituals was kept secret, and even those that failed were bound by the honor of the Legion not to speak of that which they had faced. Such was the respect given to the orders of the Hecatonistica by the rank and file warriors of the Legion. Only once fully inducted would they receive the freedom of the Order's domains and the right to begin study of the first tier of the hidden lore of their new warrior brotherhood, and to bear the mark of its acolyte upon the ceramite of their warplate. To hold a position even in the outer circles of one of the orders militant of the Hecatonistica was considered a great honor, and of the entire legion, less than half could claim such an achievement. Though few outside of the ranks of a given order knew the full import of the insignia borne by its adepts, all of the legion's warriors granted the bearer of such a sigil due respect, and few, even amongst the most senior of commanders, would fail to heed their advice, no matter what formal rank they might hold outside the order. Though it was a rare occurrence, some particularly skilled warriors within the legion bore the insignia of more than one of the orders militant upon their armor. In some cases, such warriors had formerly departed one order to take up a position in a new brotherhood, sworn to keep the secrets of their old association, while in the most exceptional of cases, they might hold rank in 2 or more orders at the same time. There are only a handful of examples of this, the most well-known being Lionel Johnson himself, who held the rank of High Preceptor of every order within the Legion, and Knight Captain Atreus Decalion, bearer of the sword Chrysor, who was also a Marshal of the Fire Wing of the Hexagrammaton, was counted as one of the finest swordsmen in the Legion and held station within 3 separate orders, blending the blade techniques of each to form a unique and deadly style of his own. Ultimately, it was this arcane, covert, and deeply layered organization of the First Legion which provided one defense from the corruption of chaos and the traitors in the years just before the outbreak of the Horus heresy. Horus and Lorgar's warrior lodges found no purchase within the ranks of the Dark Angels, as they were shunned by the preceptors of the Orders Militant and the proctors of the wings of the Hexagrammaton as worthless and beneath them. The Dark Angels thus never suffered corruption due to the actions of Horus and his allies among the traitor legions. Yet even as the heresy ended, they would face their own betrayal from within, driven by the same flaws of jealousy and vainglory that drove the War Master to rebel against the Emperor. The 500. Of all the weapons wielded by the Emperor's legions, it is not cannon or blades that are the most deadly. It is knowledge that has carried us to victories beyond count, and wisdom that has broken empires and kings. Yet still there are those who question why we keep such a potent weapon concealed from our foes within the folds of the Hexagrammaton. From the Lion Codex, the collected words and deeds of Lionel Johnson. The first 500 warriors of the Dark Angels to stand alongside their Primarch on Caliban after arriving on that world with the Emperor would come to be known simply as the 500, an honorary company embedded in the Legion's system of orders militant. Each of the 500 was sworn to a unique duty, bound to gather information and to keep it hidden for the benefit of the Legion, just as the other orders militant, save the subject of their scrutiny, was the Primarch himself. For among all the doctrines of the old hosts of the First Legion, each carefully crafted and honed by centuries of war, they had never accounted for such a manifest icon of war and death as a Primarch. Study was required that they might learn how best to fight at his side, which weapons were best suited to be deployed alongside the Primarch, and how the Legion would need to be reshaped to serve his will. Lionel Johnson himself would prove no more forthcoming to his Gene sons than he had been to his brother Primarchs. Prone to silence and self-reliance, he offered his new legion the chance to prove itself in battle, but gave them no guidance on the means by which they would best earn his respect. The 500 would serve as the Lion's lifeguard, to fight and die ever in his shadow, that the Legion might learn that which their new master was reticent to speak of and earn his favor in war. Their hard-won secrets, enshrined in the tome known as the Lion Codex, was among the most cleverly and completely ciphered records within the Legion, for it contains the sum of their knowledge of Lionel Johnson, his fighting style, and strategies. Such secrets would be valuable beyond reckoning to any foe of the Legion, and just as priceless to his Gene sons, for with the guidance of the Codex, the Council of Masters sought to reshape their Legion in his image. As such, the 500 were its only keepers, and they accepted no new initiates, which ensured that the secrets the company held lived or died with them. The Lion himself never mentioned this enterprise, never uttered one word of praise for the ever-present honor guard at his side, even as their numbers dwindled over time. Yet, neither did he forbade them their study, and on the eve of battle he often waited patiently for those of the 500 present to assemble at his side before he set forth. This silent acceptance was counted by the Dark Angels as the ultimate mark of recognition, worth more to them than any honor marking or gaudy touch of victory. The Hexagrammaton. The Primarch Lionel Johnson introduced to the First Legion of the Space Marines the organizational structure he had learned from the Knights of the Order on Caliban. The Lion's tenets of loyalty, discipline, and self-efficiency were incorporated into everything the Legion did. As the First Legion had originally been created from Terran warriors, gifted with the gene seed of the stalwart, if reticent Lion, the Dark Angels had always been regarded as dedicated and serious-minded warriors. Like their primogenitor, they were slow to anger, but tenacious and all but unstoppable once roused. Before the Horus Heresy, a Space Marine Legion might count 10,000 or more warriors under a single command, though the exact number of the Dark Angels Legion in the days of the Great Crusade and the Heresy remain unknown. However, the Legion was considered to be of moderate size for the time. Under the Lion's supervision, the First Legion was reorganized into another parallel series of specialized formations known collectively as the Hexagrammaton, and colloquially as the Six Wings. These specialized formations existed outside the regular chain of command and organization of the Legion. These formations were an amalgamation of the Terran pre-Principia Bellicosa approach used by the hosts of the First Legion and the organization of the now proscribed formations of the early Legiones Astartes and Caliban's knightly orders. Before the creation of the first Space Marine Legions, the Legiones Astartes were organized into a formation known as the Six Hosts of the Angels of Death, with each of these hosts having its own specialization and purpose. Following the first reunification with their Primarch Lionel Johnson on Caliban, the Lion incorporated the traditions of the Six Hosts and the Order, and thus the Six Wings were created. The First Legion followed the organizational principles of the Principia Bellicosa, organizing their legion's strength into chapters, which were led by masters, and below them, orders, which were led by paladins. These formations were further broken down into companies led by captains and squads commanded by sergeants. Members of the Six Wings were distributed among squads and companies, where they acted as captains, sergeants, and line legionaries, or in specialized formations when assembled on orders from their respective voted lieutenant of a wing. These voted lieutenants, also called masters, acted as both commander of their wing and often acted as counsel to their primarch. Voted lieutenants were elected by their peers rather than being nominated by a superior. They would then have their nominated successor chosen to command the wing in the event of their untimely death, so as not to interrupt the cohesiveness of a wing's command. The voted lieutenants who served as the chosen leaders of each wing often gathered together in a group known as the Council of Masters, first in the great fortress of the 1st Legion on Grammari, and later wherever the Legion was engaged after being reunited with their Primarch. On the field of battle, a commander responsible for an area of operations or campaign had to request the intervention of one of the 6 wings. When such a request was made and eventually accepted, the members of the requested wing were summoned from their duties when possible in order to assemble and conduct operations under the command of their voted lieutenant's orders. The Hexagrammaton formations that existed within the Dark Angels Legion at the time of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy included the following: the Death Wing, the Raven Wing, the Dread Wing, the Fire Wing, the Iron Wing, and the Storm Wing. The Death Wing and the Raven Wing are still used by the Dark Angels to this day in their hunt for the Fallen. The other 4 wings have been lost to the mists of time and are no longer fielded by the Angels. They have been unseen since the era of the Horus Heresy. First we have the Death Wing Protocol. The Death Wing originated as the veteran Cataphracti Terminators of the Dark Angels, who often served as lifeguards to the Legion's officers, including the Primarch. Duty weighed heavily upon the oath-bound warriors of the Death Wing, for once sworn to a task, they would let no obstacle bar them from its completion. On the battlefield, not even death would stay their advance, and where others would retreat in the face of annihilation, the Death Wing stood unmoved. When war dictated that the impossible must be achieved, it was the warriors of the Death Wing to which the 1st Legion turned. The Death Wing is unique among the Space Marine chapters of the 41st millennium, in that the entire Dark Angels 1st Company fights exclusively in Terminator armor. The Death Wing are notoriously stubborn and resistant, refusing to buckle under extreme pressure from enemy advances, even when it would be more advantageous to retreat. Yet the Death Wing is not solely a tactical formation. Promotion to it also means that an individual is made privy to many of the chapter's dark secrets. The most closely guarded of these is that of the betrayal of Luther and the Fallen, and the subsequent loss of their Primarch, Lionel Johnson. Then we have the Raven Wing Protocol. The Raven Wing Protocol, which focused on the use of anti-gravitic units and all-terrain bikes, had its origins in early Legiones Astartes tactics for rapid-moving search and destroy formations, some of which dated back to the nomadic techno-barbarian war clans of pre-unification Terra. After Caliban's discovery during the Great Crusade, these formations were revived and expanded. As they offered a form of rapid strike warfare the Knights of Caliban both understood and had perfected over many generations, though now their steeds were ones of unyielding metal rather than flesh. Then, the Dreadwing Protocol. The specialty of the Dreadwing was total warfare using the most sinister of weapons. The elected, voted lieutenant of this wing, bearing the title of Dreadbringer, commanded destroyer squads supported by other types of units to bring total annihilation of a foe on a specific battlefield. The Dreadwing also utilized mass armored assaults of land raiders, Spartan assault tanks, mastodons, and fellblades with advanced weaponry. Their hallmark was the use of dark, sinister, and shunned munitions such as phosphex, rad, and vortex weapons. Then, the Fire Wing Protocol. The Fire Wing was one of the 6 wings of the Hexagrammaton that existed during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. The smallest of the wings, the Fire Wing, was dedicated to the hidden subtleties of warfare, and within its ranks were found an eclectic mix of stalkers, champions, and Moritat killers, all bound by their shared expertise in the arts of blade and knife, duelists and assassins without peer. The Firewing sought the destruction of the enemy through the violent depletion of their command structure, whether in honorable duels at the heart of a battle, or at the hands of subtle killers far from the battlefield. When given free rein upon the field of battle, the initiates of the Firewing choose to wage a war of wills against the enemy, seeking to break their resolve rather than slaughter their ranks. The Firewing was disbanded in the wake of the Horus Heresy. There are, however, intriguing heraldic links between the Firewing and the Sigil of the Consecrators, a second founding successor chapter of the Dark Angels. The Iron Wing Protocol. The Iron Wing Protocol was developed before the Great Crusade was fully born, when the first Space Marines were used by the Emperor to exterminate threats to mankind too dire to be allowed to endanger the glorious future. He had designed later variants of this protocol, which sought to wed the superhuman power of the Legiones Astartes and amplify that killing strength with newly designed, bespoke armored units, such as the Land Raider, as well as mighty dreadnoughts in close support, for the Iron Wing's mission required the shock application of brute force. Those were entered into the Principia Bellicosa for use and development by the legions that would follow, notably the 9th and 14th. But the Dark Angels would continue to develop the tactical pattern to serve their own ends. And of course, the Stormwing Protocol. As the largest of all the wings of the Hexagrammaton, the Stormwing incorporated the majority of the Dark Angels' line infantry, training battalions and mobile ordnance batteries within its ranks. The members of this wing were drilled in the disciplined and stalwart arts of close order warfare and set-piece battles, unshakable on defense and resolute on attack. Its veteran warriors were the core of the Legion's infantry companies, capable of executing complex maneuvers and formations under the heaviest enemy fire. The Stormwing was also a tactical formation used in the Great Crusade, consisting exclusively of breacher squads armed with boarding shields. The Stormwing specialized in space-borne boarding operations.